Yeah.
Well, here we are live, and before we introduce ourselves, let you know what's going on. Why don't we backtrack and you just share what you just said because
Oh,
it was quite funny.
oh yeah. Let's see if I can repeat the joke. Oh, Robert just said, "Oh, you look good," and I was like, "Yeah. I mean, as long as we look good, that's all that matters." And I was just saying, I live in Los Angeles, and it's kind of that's the vibe here. Is like,
Yeah.
as long as you look good, everything else is okay. And I was like, yeah, that's horrible. That's not how you should gauge success or whatever. So,
Or that's not
uh,
how we should gauge. We should gauge positive mental health.
right, yeah, and I think if you struggle and you're in certain seasons of life where maybe things are harder, you can tend to maybe not worry about how you look like at all, right? And then maybe people can tell more, you know.
And I have lots of stories about that storyline
Yeah, yeah,
about not taking care of my physical self, during those times when I'm in a deeper depression than I would like to be. You're listening to the amazing, always enlightening, never never boring Jared Diehl
all right.
with Louder Now podcasts. And of course, me, Robert Manolson, the creator and facilitator of powerful play experiences, positive workplace mental health for teams. But I am always honored to be in Jared's company, to be in the presence of Jared Diehl, and tell the universe yet one more time about Louder Now podcast.
Sure, man. Hey, it's good to be here. You and I connected a few months ago. You did a guest spot on the podcast, um, and this is cool that we're just staying in touch and doing these things. So just wanted to say that to start. Um, yeah, the podcast started about almost 3 years ago now, which is crazy to think it's been that long. Done almost 100 episodes, and yeah, I've struggled for a really long time. I really think most of I mean, I'm 36. I would say I think my whole life I've struggled. But in 2007, I got a diagnosis of bipolar. And a few years before I did the podcast, I kind of did some different like speaking things where I got to share my story. And yeah, there was a combination of a bunch of some suicides that happened kind of near me, like in the community, that kind of prompted me to like want to, like, oh, I should do a podcast. That would be cool. Be a cool way to kind of get to know people, learn about myself, explore things. I think just by talking to people, you feel less alone. You learn how to cope. It's just there's a lot of benefits to talking about it. And I think that's what people can struggle with too, is not talking about it at all, right? So that's kind of how it all came together, and uh, yeah, and that's how I met you. We just did an episode together, so yeah.
And now Jared and I never stop talking
I
about
know, it's
health.
awesome, man. Out of all the guests I've had, which is probably at least 50 or 60 people, you're the only one where we do this, so no offense to those people. Like, I feel like at any given day I could just be like, probably reach out to anybody and say like, hey, let's do part two, and I know there's a few people who have wanted to do that. So but yeah, it's fun to we live in completely two different places, and obviously thankful to technology we can do this, and
You bet.
I love it, man. I love it. Yeah. If I didn't, I wouldn't say yes. I would be like, hey, leave me alone. So yeah.
Jared and I chose a very interesting topic today, which you rarely see posted on LinkedIn.
Right.
And it reads, "Why I seek the help of a psychologist and what actually takes place during my online conversation." And I'm going to let you begin because you've already enlightened people with a wonderful takeaway on that subject matter. And you talked about the importance of talking to people.
Right.
And just expand on that a little bit further.
Yeah. So the question is like, why kind of get professional help or talk to a psychologist? That's the question, right? And then you were saying also like, I was saying it's important to talk to people too. Yeah. Well, I think there's a little bit of a difference. I mean, everybody wants to have connection in their life, and even in a culture like uh, America or even where you live, and we have technology and we have access to or around lots of people, right? And there's lots of different ways you can have communities, but sometimes people don't. They feel really lonely, which kind of is strange because it's like, oh, well, aren't you like connected to people like online? And and we know there's a difference between that and then in real life. But I think when you have symptoms and maybe you haven't gotten a diagnosis, or everybody's in like a different place, as much as people can help you, you do need to probably see a professional, right? Because it's like your friends can't give you medication. Or maybe they can, no, I'm just kidding. But right, there's just kind of different levels of care, and kind of it's complicated. And yeah, people aren't perfect. Like, a psychologist doesn't know everything, but they definitely have a lot of training and a lot of time, a lot of hours spent focusing on how to kind of, you know, they understand the brain and the mind, and things are always changing. I know for me, I actually avoided therapy for like, I don't know, 7 or 8 years, like into the diagnosis.
Mm.
So anyway, we can talk about that more later or whatever. But it took me a while to kind of come around to like, that part of uh, that piece of the recovery puzzle, if that kind of makes sense.
What I appreciate in your perspective is a lot of things, but most significantly is you make the distinction between talking to people
Mm-hmm.
and talking to a professional. So at the very beginning, when you reference talking to people, immediately in my mind I thought, oh, talking to a psychologist.
Oh,
But
right. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that was neat. You drew a distinction between
Yeah.
the two, and so in a good way that set me straight because you were referencing uh, significant benefits or different benefits
Right.
to connecting with a professional. Not dismissing talking to people, but the benefits are quite different.
Yeah.
Um, at a year ago in August, I reached out for the support of an online psychologist.
Okay.
Yeah, previously in my life, I had been seeing a psychologist at his office
Okay.
for a number of years. Uh, uh, Now, sort of, spring forward so many years later, um, times my mental health was not in a good place in August of 2020, and
Okay.
uh, so it was recommended by a friend of mine to reach out to an online psychologist. And having had previous experience with a psychologist, plus having grown up in a family where uh, professional doctors, psychologists, were family, like extended family members.
Okay.
Yes, I was quite comfortable once again with the idea of reaching out to a psychologist, but the idea of online threw me for a bit of a loop. Have you had a chance to experience something like that before?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, you know what? Not really. No. I know that a lot of times, well, in the States at least, we have this service called BetterHelp.
Hmm.
It's on a lot of podcasts where people, like, you know, if you're a big podcast, you get advertisements and stuff, and there's like so many use BetterHelp, like get 10% off, you know. But yeah, it's basically like an online community. I'm sure it's not the only one. I've never really, I've kind of been privileged to have a clinic that I go to that's like in person, and it's sort of it's kind of like a treatment team approach. So I have like a psychiatrist who's really good, and just I've had for really, I mean, since 2014. We, I mean, we had like a lapse of not seeing each other, but and then I have a therapist, and so yeah, I haven't had to do the online part. Um,
So, and what is the difference between psychologist, therapist, psychiatrist?
oh yeah, good question. Well, I guess my understanding is a lot of times the psychologists and therapists are similar. Uh, what's the word? Like their education path and training is similar. Like they do, master's level work as far as like school is concerned, which and nowadays for people that's like at least 10 years of school probably,
Mm.
unless you're like super smart and you do it in like 5 years or something. Yeah, just burn through those books, man. But yeah, it takes people a while to go to school. I mean, it's like 6 years minimum, I think. And then there is training as a therapist is 3,000 hours of actual doing therapy, which is like that's a lot of time, right?
So how does the help look like when you contrast a therapist to a psychiatrist to a psychologist?
Mhm.
Are you able to articulate that?
Yeah. Well, I guess, I mean, maybe there's a different level with a psychologist where like they could be more just kind of uh, really deep into like education or certain topics that they have like maybe a doctorate in. So like they could be more of a specialist, right? Like a psychologist could be more of a like a lot of people focus on trauma. That's like a big topic. That's a bigger topic now. I mean, it's been around forever, but like the connection between trauma and mental illness, or people focus on addiction, substance abuse,
Hmm.
so that's my understanding of it. Like a psychologist might be a little bit more of a specialist in a certain area, and a therapist would be more a lot of experience like talking to people, but they also do have education as well. um, I
I
think I've mostly seen therapists, to be honest, so
okay.
that's my experience. Yeah.
It's and good to know that there, Jared. Good to know that.
Yeah, that's my understanding. I mean, I
Okay.
probably should look into it. What about you? Has that been your experience? Are
Well,
you? Yeah.
my experience has been with a psychologist, and
Okay.
I haven't researched the difference, but I know one thing for sure is my psychologist um, cannot prescribe meds.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's
So if when people think of psychologists or just a psychologist, I want people to know that in both of my experiences, my psychologists do not prescribe meds. I need to see my GP, my general practitioner, my doctor, to talk about prescription medication. Um, I'm thoroughly enjoying my experience with my online psychologist, and
Okay. That's cool.
she made it very clear at the beginning, and I was quite open to it, that we're going to follow a cognitive behavioral therapy. Is that something that rings a bell for you?
Yeah, it does for sure. Yeah. Well, I got the book Cognitive Behavioral Therapies for Dummies.
No way. Oh,
Yeah, it's pretty good actually. Yeah.
wow.
Which I'm pretty sure there's like hundreds of those in that kind of series, right? Yeah. I mean, for people listening who might not know what that is, it's basically a kind of a discipline that believes that like thoughts thoughts lead to behaviors, and sort of thoughts, feelings, actions are all kind of like if it's a triangle, kind of connected. So if you keep thinking, I know last episode we did of this, we talked about negative self-talk. So like if whatever you kind of feed sort of becomes reality,
Mm.
right, in your mind, which is strange to think about that sometimes. Like, oh, is my mind really that powerful? And what's hard is we have thousands of thoughts a day, and a lot of them go very naturally, just they're negative, or they're like unrealistic, right? Like anxieties, or just wonder what that person's thinking, and it's like, well, you don't really know, but you go up and ask them. No, I'm just kidding. But that's kind of generally what it is. So it's like, look, over time, and I think one of the symptoms of uh, depression, bipolar, is you feel kind of stuck in your head a lot, or you feel like, yeah, things are really negative, and um, you got to get some help. Like, it's not like it's all about the mind or all about the thoughts, but it plays probably a bigger role than maybe we realize.
Well,
Um, yeah,
very well said.
yeah,
Very well said, because that's exactly how things play out with my psychologist. And when we met a year ago, this past August, she said, unlike your previous psychologist, I'm not here to delve into your family history.
okay,
It will come into play in some of our conversations, but I'm not here for that. I'm here for you on whether you decide a weekly or a bi-weekly basis to help you with the here and now, and getting present with all the activities and happenings in your life, and help you to best manage that. So every week, I'm going to ask you to reflect on, the happenings, the events in your life,
hmm,
and how you've been managing that. And uh, most significantly, at the front end of our conversation, she'll ask me, on a mood scale of 1 to 10,
hmm,
what's your mood? From high to low, 1 to 10. Describe your mood. Where do you fit on the mood scale? But she'll also ask me, um, uh, on a scale of 1 to 10, how am I? How would I rate managing? Yeah, managing myself,
hmm,
and which is a whole different type of question. Like, how am I managing? And
yeah,
although I might score low on the mood scale, maybe from a 3 to 5, I tend to score high on the managing scale, which is, for me, a high is 7. I don't think I've hit an 8 or a 9 or 10 quite yet.
nice.
So yeah, exactly, nice. And that's what often that's what she'll say to me, nice. Like,
Oh
you
yeah,
might you might not be where you need to be,
yeah, yeah,
your thoughts or emotions, but I'm happy to hear that you've embraced some strategies to best manage you. So it's it's not about sort of cleaning up my act when I see her every 2 weeks to move from unhappy to happy. Let's clean it up, Rob. Let's get rid of the unhappy and move into the happy. It's
right, right, right.
it's a check-in.
Hmm.
It's a bi-weekly check-in around living with and managing depression and anxiety. And and reflecting upon the management of that through all my previous, activities and events,
Yeah.
both work and life. And I think that's pretty cool because I feel so, I, I get clarity on some of the thoughts that I have simply by having that professional in front of me
Right.
as a sounding board. She's often challenged me to do some readings, and I mean, she's politely challenged me. I'm not a reader, so she's learned over time that when she requests I do some reading, it ain't gonna happen.
Okay.
But one thing that I found wonderfully cool about this particular psychologist is her knowledge base around something as simple as sleep management or her knowledge around, you know, uh, healthy foods, so nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
So it goes beyond just conversations around mood, uh, uh, managing depression, managing anxiety. So she's checking in with me about my, I think the term is sleep hygiene or my
Yeah.
sleep management, as well as what I'm feeding my body, what I shouldn't be feeding my body, and also health and exercise. So it's a very holistic approach to
That's good.
yeah, to the sessions that we have. So um, yeah. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I like the um well, first of all, I think it just sounds like that's a pretty balanced approach, I mean, I think um I mean, I don't have like much experience on the other side of like being a therapist, right? But I think if people just get too like narrow with things, that tends to not help us. I think mental health is very much so, multiple things all kind of, working sort of for or against you. It's not just medication, it's not just, exercise. It's really kind of like the answer on the test, all of the above, right? Which sometimes you select that when you don't know. So, right. You're like, oh, yeah, they all were the first president. Yeah, yeah, all of the above. You're like, no, that's wrong. But yeah, it's very much like, it's never been one thing that moves you forward, right? It's multiple things. And I think there's different stages in life where you might be just focusing on different things. But yeah, something like the fact that like they bring up the health thing and how you eat. Um, if you see a psychiatrist and you don't see a therapist or a psychologist, they might not bring that up at all, right?
Oh,
They might just be like, "Oh, take the medication."
yes,
That's kind of
yes.
how the hospital system works. It's like it has nothing to do with like physical health because they only have you for a short amount of time. So it's kind of like all meds and like that's about it.
Wow. Wow.
So anyway, that's a whole conversation too of just like, look, people need long term, tools and help. So, but I do also like the thing about the check in, right? That's
Mm,
kind of the structure of like I think a lot of times in life, I think when you're close to people, it's kind of one of those like, how was your day? How are you feeling? Like people don't necessarily check in with you, like just as like on a friendship level, and especially on like a acquaintance level, right? Like people aren't like, "How are you feeling today?" That's just kind of awkward, right? But I think to have a space where you know you can do the check-in thing,
mm,
it makes you think about what you're doing and how you and sometimes like look day to day we don't things don't change dramatically, right? Like the way I felt yesterday is like how I kind of feel right now, but yeah, I think that's a really good question, and then I like the thing that you said about like, so it's not just about how you feel because sometimes we don't always know, um,
mm,
but also just how are you managing yourself Yeah, a lot of times our answer is like not managing very well or not managing at all. And over time, if that continues to be your answer, like you probably know you need to get help if that's
Yeah.
your answer. And no, nobody wants to feel that way long term, like constantly feeling like you're not in control. Um, I mean, I think there's tons of resources out there and ways we can find a way to um, not feel that way. You know.
Well, why don't we begin to wrap things up with uh, um, the disclaimer that we in a sense a disclaimer, but we didn't come here today to delve deeply into the subject matter. Um, we came here today to put two men in front of a camera and um, point the light on two men
Yeah.
who seek out professional help and then go public with it.
Right.
And that was the most important piece for me today, to show that hey guys, it's okay. This thing's okay. It's not that scary. We've only skimmed the surface, and that's okay too. We've
Mm-hmm.
kept it light. We've kept it positive. And I will say one thing: I'm very, very fortunate. Now that I've used the word positive, I am very, very fortunate um, to have a psychologist in my life, and I'm also very fortunate to have the ability to afford one as
Mm-hmm.
well. So I
Yeah.
know there's a lot that could be spoken about in regards to the gaps in the system that
Right.
aren't meeting everybody's needs. If you enjoyed the conversation today, if you liked the conversation today, better yet, if you liked it or didn't like it, still check out Jared's podcast.
Yeah.
Uh,
Thanks.
what's that?
I said thanks, man. Yeah. Yeah. I was laughing at the "if you don't like it" part, but can't. Not everybody's gonna like you, right? I guess. I don't know. Maybe I'm in a delusional world of thinking everyone likes me. Um, Although that's been kind of the pattern most of my life. So, it's it. That's like a weird thing to say, but I'm like, it's kind of true, man. I mean, I don't, you know, maybe saying that people are like, oh, well, that guy is just really into himself. Like, I mean, sure, maybe. No, I'm just kidding. No, I was just laughing at that. But yeah, continue.
I usually close off, uh, recordings with something like that. Hey, if you love the show, give me a call. Hey, if you didn't, it's okay. Give me a call as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I encourage everybody to have some fun by checking out Jared's Louder Now podcast, and to reach out to me for anything related to positive workplace mental health, routines. We're done. This was cool. We kept it light. We we put ourselves on display for about a half hour or so.
Yeah, yeah.
What the world that, oh, there's two guys on there talking about seeing their psychologist or therapist, which is pretty cool in itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
No,
And
was there something you wanted to wrap up with?
oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, thanks for having me. And I love that we're two men talking about this stuff. Not that we can't talk about other things like sports or chopping wood or something. No, I'm just kidding. Things I'm not good at. No, no. Look, I grew up playing hockey. You're in Canada. We've talked about that before, but yeah, I think just especially this time of the year it can be stressful with the holidays and family dynamics, um, triggers, addiction. It's just a lot of times we holidays are just low points for people. And yeah, I just like do your best to get outside. I mean, do something fun, or just try to enjoy the time that you have now. And yeah, I really appreciate you doing this, man. So
All good. It's all good. It's all good. You said get out and have fun. I gotta do more of that. I'm the fun at work guy who doesn't have a lot of fun during his day.
I mean, we all got to work on it, man. There's always that thing that's like, oh, I could go hiking, or I could, and sometimes we choose maybe the thing that's not as enjoyable, and it's like, just try to, do better next time. Or it's not even a do better, but just make a different choice.
Yeah.
So
you rock. You rock. Okay, there's a red button in the top right-hand corner. It says end broadcast.
Oh, me? Press that?